Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video, it is the most demanded top 10 video for the channel, which is top 10 Head of Mischief tanks for Raid Shadow Legends. Obviously, this is the Hydra clan boss. What am I talking about here? What is a Head of Mischief tank? If you've not seen my videos before, it's very, very simple. The A1 ability of the Head of Mischief attempts to steal your buffs and turn meter. He attacks the enemy with the most buffs, steals all the buffs from the target, and steals 50% of the target's turn meter as well. This is pretty bad news. Now, we can help combat this in a fairly large way by bringing block buffs. Put those on the Hydra heads so that when he does the steal, block buff stops the buffs being stolen, or at the very least stops him from doing his buff spread effect where he'll put it on the other heads. That's a decent option. Although you can run into this problem where he starts to steal a lot of your turn meter, which ruins sort of your team's rotation of abilities, and starts to make those Hydra heads go, it just gives him a lot more turns, basically. So it's more chances for things to go wrong, and it ticks down that devour timer faster and faster. The other way is a Mischief tank. So if we can bring a champion that has the most buffs consistently, and we build them with really high resistance, what does that mean? We can basically make it so that they will always resist both the buff steal and the turn meter steal, and it makes the Hydra fight a heck of a lot easier. So we're talking about the top 10 champions for doing this in today's video. Now, right before we dive in, one more thing in case you're wondering how much resistance do we need. You said very high. How high is very high? This is the accuracy of the Head of Mischief as it is right now. On normal, 250. Hard 310, brutal 345, nightmare 350. I mean, as you can see pretty obviously, I do still hold out hope that they will nerf the accuracy of him on the lower difficulties. You can just tell from the jump between brutal and nightmare that these lower ones are over budgeted. But anyway, basic rule of thumb here, if you have 100 resistance more, i.e. for normal, I bring 350 resistance against 250 accuracy, you have roughly a 90% success rate of resisting. So 1 in 10 times he will steal your buffs and or turn meter. I think it's more like specific like 88 or 89%, but 90% is a good rule of thumb, good way to think about it. If you crank it up to 150 resistance more, so that's 400 for normal, be going up to 500 for nightmare. This is what I recommend for a dedicated Mischief tanker for most of them if you can. Some are going to be much easier to build than others, and I'm going to explain that in today's video, of course. 500 resistance more, you've about a 95% success rate. So you get that extra 6 or 5%-ish. It makes a big difference. It does add up. It makes it much more consistent, and that is what you want. I think you can go for the lower number. Aim for 100 more if you've got to block buffs. So you can stop the buffs being stolen when they do get stolen. That can work. Alternatively, yeah, I'd be trying to crank them up as high as you can. Decrease accuracy, also very helpful. The best chance of resistance you can ever get, 97% success rate is the best possible. But you need to stack so much resistance, it's not really worth it, and your champions need other stats too. So decrease accuracy can really help you push up to that super consistent 97%. Right, without any further ado, let's dive into the list, shall we? So, number 1, we're going to start from the best of the best. Number 1, is it any surprise to anyone? Krisk the Ageless, of course. He is the best Mischief tank in the entire game. Not only that, he's the best champion for Hydra in the entire game. He is the best, the number 1. Why is he so good? How does he do it? Well, Centuried Vigor, his A2, is how he does his Mischief tanking. 3 turn cooldown when it's booked, AoE attack, ally protection on everyone for 2 turns, and 2 continuous heals on him for 1 turn, but then he increases all buff durations. So he increases these from 1 turn to 2 turn buffs. 2 continuous heals for 2 turns. He does it every 3 turns. Not bad. That's going to help him tank that head. Also, he's at the same time he's protecting your team, halving the damage they take, and he can easily tank that damage himself because he's healing himself with these buffs. He's extending all your other buffs, making it super consistent. So, for example, champions like Lydia that give you strength and increased speed for 2 turns, he extends them. Buff extenders make this Mischief tanking much more consistent. Krisk brings that buff extension himself. Then he brings AoE decreased speed. He can provoke Head of Decay. Give himself increased defense for an extra buff if you don't have increased defense on your squad. Decreased defense, decreased attack on enemies when they hit him. So really consistently applying those to the Hydra heads. He is just amazing. Krisk so good. He brings 50 base resistance as well. So it makes it very easy to build him to be effective. How do you build him? It's very intensive to build him well, but he wants obviously super high resistance, really high accuracy because he's got so many good debuffs, and then good speed, and then his defensive stats it's actually quite easy to build him tanky because he's so good at that. Next up, we're actually sticking in the same faction for champion number 2. And this is a champion I think people don't have really too much idea about. I don't have them, so I haven't done a showcase yet. And I really want to draw attention to them in this video. But number 2, Head of Mischief tank, is Skull-Lord Vargal. This champion's incredible. I'm almost making this entire video just to tell you about Skull-Lord Vargal, to be honest with you. I got like some comments recently of people saying, oh, pull Skull-Lord Vargal in the 2x Sacreds. What a bummer. I'm going like, dude, he's one of the best champs in the game now. He's so good. So good. How does he tank Mischief? It's his A2 Skull Claim. Strengthen on himself for 2 turns. Also puts a provoke on a target enemy for 1 turn. This has a 2-turn cooldown. So strengthen on himself for 2 turns on a 2-turn cooldown. Permanent strengthen on himself. If you do not bring strengthen with the rest of your team, he'll always have 1 buff more. So he's good to go. At the same time, he can lock down Head of Decay pretty much just entirely by himself. With those provokes that you can now do in Head of Decay, he can provoke it every 2 turns he gets. Amazing. Absolutely incredible champ. He has the best base stats in the entire game by like a country mile. Like, he's so far ahead of everyone. It's not even funny. 90 base resist, 70 base accuracy, 107 base speed, 27k base HP. This guy is ridiculously good. And then he brings good utility for your team as well. AoE decrease attack to help you stay alive against Head of Wrath. That's sort of the main thing right there. Then he also does like some max HP decreasing, which makes him exceptional against Scarab King. He's pretty much the best champion in the game against Scarab King. And then his passive here, Skull Brood, makes him exceptional for Faction Wars. So you go in Skull-Lord Vargal, exceptional for Faction Wars, fastest Scarab boss farm, and absolutely insane for Hydra. Insane champion, absolutely nuts. He's so good. He's number 2. Number 3, Inquisitor Chamele. Yeah, this one's going to surprise some people. The reason Inquisitor is so good at this is that he brings so much to your team. He's so crucial for really making Hydra easy. It's really all comes from his passive, where whenever an ally gets fear or true fear, he removes the debuff, and then he actually fills the leader position of your team. Whoever is highest up in your team position at the time, he'll fill their turn meter. Exceptionally good against the Head of Torment in Hydra. The thing that lets him really work here though is his A1, where he constantly counterattacks whenever an enemy places a debuff on an ally, and he does counterattack whenever those fears go out. So we put Inquisitor Chamele in a Blood Shield accessory. That's an accessory that gives you a tiny little shield whenever you attack based off of the damage that you do. And it doesn't matter that the shield is absolutely tiny. What matters is that because he's got this counterattack mechanic that he's constantly doing, he'll constantly be giving himself this shield. It's a minuscule shield, but it's still enough to bait the Head of Mischief, so he can function as your Mischief tank. The reason it's so useful is you bring him in as your Mischief tank, he counters Head of Torment and Head of Mischief just by himself. You put him in something like a Guardian set to help protect your team as well, and now he's helping them deal with like Head of Blight and Head of Wrath too. He just does so much in one champion. And it's just extremely powerful. Like, he doesn't do that much else himself outside of his passive. It's just some single target damage. Not that valuable for Hydra. So why not build him to deal with Mischief as well? So he's an exceptional Mischief tank, but you do need that Blood Shield accessory for it to work, really. You can also alternatively just build him extremely slow, or build him extremely slow, so he keeps all buffs on him, whereas they'll be dropping off other champions. That can work too, but it's not as effective as bringing in the Blood Shield. In 4th place then, going over to Bannerlords, a champion I do have and need to build up for this, Lord Champfort. Great champion. Really good champion. What's he doing? So first of all, well, the thing that lets him Mischief tank is his passive here. It needs to be booked. Then it's a 1-turn cooldown that gives him a shield for 20% of his max HP for 2 turns. And that's basically how he works as the Mischief tank. He gives himself a big shield every single time he takes a turn. He's got very good base HP, so it's easy to make this a reasonable shield. Obviously, this can break. If the shield gets broken, he's not going to do his job anymore. But it should be a good enough shield that will be up nearly all the time. On top of that, he brings some really good utility as well. He's going to put decreased speeds, the small version of decreased speed, but nonetheless, he will be applying decreased speed for a turn whenever an enemy attacks him. A lot of these Hydra heads have AoE, and obviously he's going to be tanking Mischief, so he'll be placing decreased speed on all of them. Really strong. Small chance for decreased defense in his A1. Then he's got a really good A2, AoE attack, 3-turn cooldown, decrease accuracy, and decrease attack on all enemies for 2 turns. Very helpful. Helps you survive against Head of Wrath with a decreased attack, like Skull Lord does. And that decreased accuracy is going to make the whole Head of Mischief tanking thing much easier. So you could potentially, if you're struggling with your resistance, you could leave him slightly low, like around about that 100, slightly more than 100 mark, and you could rely a bit more on that decreased accuracy debuff to pull you through. It's definitely an option. So yeah, he comes through and he's a very, very good option here. Skull Lord, Lord Chamfort here. One of the issues with him is that his affinity can get in the way a little bit, right? This decreased attack, decreased accuracy. He's blue affinity. So for example, in the current rotation, there's a lot of red affinity Hydra heads. So he's not as good there, but he's still a really strong option. In 5th spot, another champion that gets absolutely nowhere near the attention that he should. Elder Scarg. So underrated. So underrated. And he's quite a different sort of champion from the ones you've looked at before. He's very squishy, so you'll need to build him to survive. How do you build him, though? What's he do? This is what lets him Mischief tank. Tide of Steel is A1. Attacks a single enemy. Gives himself increased speed if he crits. And gives himself increased crit rate if he doesn't crit. So the key thing here is you build him with as little crit rate as possible. Leave him at the 15% if you can. That's what you want to do. You can send him down and grab War Master, or maybe even Giant Slayer if you want to as well. But just if you're going down the offense tree, go against your natural instinct, your natural reflex, and don't take the increased crit rate mastery. Just take the attack mastery. Don't give him any crit rate. Increased crit rate's a super rare buff. No one's really going to be bringing that for your team. So this is, again, his unique buff that he puts on himself. And by keeping his crit rate low, we can sort of ensure that he's going to keep refreshing it. So this is how he does it. And what's the point of doing this? Well, the point is his A2. Triple hitter, extra hit for each buff or debuff on the target. So very simply, with 3 debuffs only, he does 3 extra hits. And if that happens, he puts HP burn for 2 turns on all enemies, just AoE. I believe he can trigger this easily through the Poison Cloud as well. So very useful. Also steals all buffs from the target after the attack, which is kind of nifty as well, to remove some of those reflect damage type buffs too. Very good. Very, very strong. Yeah, that's essentially what he's doing. AoE HP burn and a bit of a buff steal. He can also give himself increased defense as an extra buff if you need that to tank Head of Mischief more. He does a whole bunch of other stuff that don't work against the Hydra. There's a lot in his kit, like his passive doesn't work against Hydra, all the rest. But yeah, he's a really good option for that Mischief tank that's just continually overlooked. A Mischief tank that brings AoE HP burn. In the 6th position, we're jumping to an epic. One of my personal favorites. I absolutely love her for this. Oboro. She is super good. How does she do it? Her A3. Increased crit rate, increased crit damage for 2 turns, and then perfect fail if she crits. So she needs to be built a bit more intensive in gear here. A bit more intensive in gear. She needs to be built with 70% crit rate so that she jumps to 100% crit rate with this buff. Then she'll get perfect fail. When she gets a perfect fail, she gives herself Revive on Death for 3 turns. So that's 4 buffs, guys. 4 buffs that she gives herself. It's absolutely bananas. This makes it so consistent for her to be a Mischief tank. And typically what I'm building her to do is I'm building her with really high resistance at 70% crit rate. And I try to build her with some damage and crit damage as well. Make her hit hard because she does good damage. Her A1 can be an AoE attack if they have lots of debuffs. That has a decent chance of placing decreased defense. AoE decreased defense, very, very useful. She can also remove buffs with her A2, which is nice. But yeah, it's just that consistency. So many buffs here. So many buffs. That's what makes her so strong for this, because it's so easy to get Mischief targeting her every single time. So she's really, really good for it. In a similar vein, another champion I've seen one person mention in my Discord. Next time I get in the test server, I'm going to do a video on her, guys. But in 7th spot, it's actually Cleopatrix, or Cleopatrix. I don't know how you say her name. But yeah, she works similarly to Oboro. The nice thing about Cleopatrix or Cleopatrix is she has a login reward. You will get her. So what does she do? 3 turn cooldown here, Feather Barrage. Increase crit rate, increase crit damage on her for 2 turns with an AoE attack. So compared to Oboro, she brings consistent AoE attacks for lots of damage. But this is only 2 buffs for 2 turns. So you need to be a little careful. You might need a buff extender. Then also on her A3, increase accuracy for 2 turns on a 4-turn cooldown when booked. So another buff. Again, not the best uptime, but it is another buff. On top of that, it's an AoE attack that can place Hex for 3 turns. So this gives you a good way to apply Hex, which helps counter Head of Mischief even more. Excuse me, hiccups. Oh my goodness. So she's quite decent. Quite decent. She also has a weaken on her A1. Good chance to place it against hexed targets. And she can do some counterattacks potentially with her passive. So yeah, she is a good option. I do think that she's obviously intensive in terms of gear. Not as consistent as a Boro, and she does need legendary books. But she can be a very good option. And bringing that hex is pretty cool. Also, if they ever do come in and add this whole block active skills to Hydra, which I think is likely to be added at some point, I'd actually quite like to see this come in as a useful debuff, a relevant debuff for Hydra at some point. Then she brings this too, so she could become really good if that's the case. Obviously, that's not relevant right now, so she's only 7th in the list, but she could climb up. Let's go to someone that's very, very easy to build. In 8th position, I'm putting Baredol Fellhammer. What does Baredol do? Well, not much is the answer. Not much. He's got some single target damage. He can do like a single target decreased defense. Not very useful. Not very useful, really. But what he does do well is he comes in and he gives himself counterattack every single turn. Whenever he takes a turn, he gives himself counterattack. Boom. Easy. That's what makes Baredol so great. He's so easy to make work as this Mischief tank. He just doesn't bring utility really for your team. He does very little else. He also comes with 60 base resistance, so it's easy to hit that resistance threshold. So yeah, Baredol. I do have him up here in 8th position just because he is very consistent at tanking Head of Mischief. He's so good at doing it, but he's not the best option at all, and he's easy to build. He's just not the best option because he doesn't do too much else. I definitely recommend building him for some damage if you can. Just build him tanky enough to not die, and then build him to at least hit hard, and he'll put out some okay damage with his counterattacks and his actual hits. So yeah, he's a decent option, but more on the easy side as opposed to the powerful side. Now, in 9th position, a champion people always overlook, one of my favorite champions here on the channel, Mother Cybele. Lots of different ways you can build her. Again, she's got really good base stats across the board, like 115 base speed. Super, super good. The thing that lets her be the Mischief tank is Uncanny Transfer. It does need to be booked, goes to a 3-turn cooldown. Now, compared to the other champions, this is not a 100% consistent way to do it, but it is a viable and valuable thing to bring to your team. Not 100% consistent, but it can work quite a bit. Basically, she swaps HP levels with one of your other champions. If she has higher HP after the swap, so if she's low on HP and you steal it off someone else, it fills her turn meter 40%, gives her increased speed, and gives her 2 continuous heal buffs for 1 turn. That's usually the worst way to do it. The better way to do it is to bring her as a champion that's helping to keep your squisher champs alive. So let's say you're in there with, let's say, a Royal Guard who's been nuked down a bit because Royal Guard's fairly squishy. She comes in, swaps HP with him, so she heals him back up. Very good against Head of Decay when they place heal reduction on someone you can't heal them. She can swap HP nonetheless. And then she'll have lower HP. She will fill their turn meter, give them increased speed. Amazing on your nukers. And then for her, she'll give herself block damage and 2 continuous heals. So she'll give herself these 3 unique buffs, which is just great. Turn meter boost your damage dealer, which is just great. And yeah, she'll be really low on life, so she'll also bait in Head of Decay to attack her, and she'll resist the heal reduction, and it will bait in Mischief with this. Now, it's only on a 3-turn cooldown, and this is only on for 1 turn. Compared to Krisk, Krisk extends his buffs, which is how it works for him. She doesn't extend her buff, so it doesn't work for her. If you got a buff extender, you can't extend block damage, but you can extend continuous heals, so that can work. But just generally speaking, what I typically use her for, I actually used her this rotation in the lead, where she gives you speed, and with Inquisitor Chamele boosting her turn meter, she gives herself turn meter boost on her A1 as well. She takes so many turns that basically when you see Head of Mischief's about to take a turn, and because she's applying decreased speed, she can get it consistently on him. When he's about to take a turn, you can then activate her A3, and hopefully, if you time it right, you can get him to attack her. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to make it work. It's not 100% consistent, but it's a really cool strategy, and it's an amazing supplement as well. It can be super helpful keeping your team alive. And then in the final position, in position number 10, a really good free-to-play option as well, guys, is Dragstar Blood Twin. Free champion from the Bazaar, and make sure you get him from the Tag Arena Bazaar, because he's so good for so much in this game. Okay, how does Dragstar work? Well, here's the thing. He doesn't give himself any buffs. No buffs for Dragstar, which is why he's number 10. No buffs for him. But what Dragstar does do, a couple of interesting things. 50 base resistance, that's good. Gives himself resistance 10 more for every enemy under HP burn debuff. Stacks up to 50. Now, there's only 4 Hydra heads, but you can reliably get, you know, maybe like 20 to 40 more resistance out of this, which is going to help you just push up. So if you are struggling to get to that 150 resistance more, even if you just get him to 100 resistance more for whatever difficulty level you're on, his passive can help push you up to that more consistent level, which is good. The big thing, though, is whenever he is hit, he has a 75% chance, and with masteries, you can increase that to 80% chance to put HP burn on his attacker for 2 turns. This is super good, right? This is super good. And basically what we do, it's the dummies way, I guess, you know, the super simple way of being a Mischief tank, which is we just build him with no speed. We just go 0 speed for Dragstar Blood Twin, leave him super slow, so he never really does anything, but he just stands there getting hit. He stands there getting smacked. Well, great thing is, he's just going to throw out a bunch of HP burns. He's effectively your AoE HP burner, never or almost never taking a turn. It's actually kind of great. He also brings you an accuracy aura, which can be quite helpful too when you're starting out. So we just build him with really high resistance, really high accuracy. You do want to build him pretty tanky as well, because, you know, he's not going to heal from any continuous heals, and he's not going to heal from regen or lifesteal much, because he's going to be so slow. So you can build him just really slow, and he'll do his job. He can also play some burns on his A1, which is okay. His A2 is actually quite nice, books through a 3-turn cooldown, and it's an AoE provoke. Specifically against Head of Decay, it is a provoke. If they're burned, it's a 100% chance to provoke if they're burned. So Dragstar is good. I actually really love him as well. I've done videos on this before. Check out my Gizzo video. But Gizzo, he works super well with him. Gizzo's your 1 week login reward. You put these 2 champions in together, that you can have both of them ready and built 6 months into the game easily. Gizzo has a 2-turn provoke for Head of Decay, which is great, and he can also put shield and counterattack on 1 ally, right? So you can put that shield and counterattack buff onto Dragstar, and then Dragstar is going to be counterattacking, applying even more burns as well, and just making him a super consistent. Basically, Gizzo is the one that provides the buff, so that can work really well. You can use champions like Vergis as well, but Gizzo is a great login reward. So yeah, there you go, guys. Top 10. My top 10 champions that can tank Head of Mischief. If you got any other ones that you use, let me know. There's obviously other options. You know, you throw in those Blood Shield accessories and stuff starts to get a lot more consistent as well. Obviously, nearly all of these champions too will benefit from Blood Shield accessories. Let me show you my Chamele. He's got one. Yeah, like a Blood Shield ring. And really, it doesn't matter. Just hold on to these Blood Shield accessories. They are absolutely insane. It doesn't even matter if they're rubbish. They could be completely useless, but just the fact that it gives you that tiny shield can be super worthwhile, just to make it more consistent for tanking the Hydra. So there you go. Hopefully you found it helpful. I will see you all next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.